From rusty bolts to rustic beauty, the journey of transforming forgotten industrial scraps into charming wooden home accents begins not in a workshop, but in a shift of mindset, where what once looked like waste suddenly becomes possibility, where a bent bolt, a weathered screw, or a discarded metal plate no longer represents the end of usefulness, but the beginning of a new story, and as hands reach into a box of old hardware mixed with reclaimed wood. There's a quiet excitement in knowing that these imperfect materials already carry history, texture, and character that no store-bought supply could ever offer, because rustic beauty is not about hiding flaws, but about revealing them with intention and respect, allowing every mark, every patch of rust, and every grain line to contribute to a piece that feels alive and honest. And as we begin shaping wood and pairing it with industrial remnants, the process itself becomes deeply satisfying, grounding, and creative, reminding us that art does not need to start clean or new to become meaningful. Welcome to Hope Tube, a place where wood, creativity, and home decor come together. Here we transform simple materials into warm, meaningful designs, sharing inspiring woodcraft ideas that turn houses into homes. Relax, imagine, and let creativity grow with every creation. The moment wood meets metal, something special happens, as the warmth of natural grain softens the cold hardness of steel, and the contrast creates balance, drawing the eye and inviting curiosity, because these sculptures and home accents are not meant to be perfect or symmetrical. They are meant to feel human, slightly playful, sometimes amusing, sometimes thought-provoking, but always authentic. And when a rusty bolt becomes an eye, a hinge becomes a spine, or an old washer turns into a smile, the piece suddenly carries personality, as if it has quietly waited years to become what it was always meant to be. Working with industrial discards teaches patience and imagination, because no two materials are the same, no two bolts age identically, and no two wooden boards carry the same scars, which means every creation must respond to the material rather than force it into a rigid design. And this dialogue between maker and material is where creativity truly flourishes, where mistakes are not failures but invitations to adapt, where a crack in the wood becomes a feature instead of a flaw, and where uneven textures add depth rather than detract from beauty. As hands sand rough edges while intentionally leaving traces of age, and as rust is cleaned just enough to preserve strength without erasing character, there is a growing appreciation for imperfection, a realization that smoothness is not the only form of refinement, and that rustic art gains its power from honesty, from showing exactly what it is without pretending to be something else. And this honesty resonates deeply with modern audiences who are increasingly tired of mass-produced perfection and eager for objects that tell real stories. The satisfying rhythm of assembling these pieces creates a meditative flow, where time slows down and attention sharpens, where the noise of the outside world fades and is replaced by the sound of wood being shaped and metal being fitted. And in these moments, creativity feels less like effort and more like conversation, as if the materials themselves are guiding the hands toward forms that feel balanced and expressive. Rustic wood sculptures often carry a gentle sense of humor, not loud or exaggerated, but subtle and charming, appearing in the tilt of a head, the curve of a bolt, or the unexpected placement of a screw. And this humor brings warmth into living spaces, making people smile without knowing exactly why, reminding them that art does not always need to be serious to be meaningful, and that joy can exist quietly in the details. As these sculptures evolve into finished home accents, whether resting on shelves, hanging on walls, or standing proudly on tables, they transform the spaces around them, not by dominating attention, but by adding character and soul, because rustic decor does not demand admiration. It earns it slowly through texture, balance, and authenticity. And when guests notice these pieces, they often lean closer, curious about the materials, intrigued by the imperfections, and drawn to the story they sense beneath the surface. One of the most powerful aspects of turning industrial discards into wooden art is the realization that creativity thrives within limitation, that having fewer perfect materials forces deeper thinking, stronger problem-solving, and more expressive design choices. And this creative discipline results in pieces that feel intentional rather than decorative, pieces that feel made rather than manufactured. 5-second gap. Beyond artistic satisfaction, there is also practical value in this process, because rustic wood sculptures and home accents created from reclaimed materials hold strong appeal in today's market, where sustainability, originality, and handmade craftsmanship are increasingly appreciated. And when people learn that a piece was made from discarded bolts and leftover wood, its value grows not only financially but emotionally, because it represents renewal, responsibility, and imagination. These artworks prove that profit and creativity do not have to conflict, that meaningful design can emerge from humble beginnings, and that turning waste into art is not just environmentally responsible but creatively rewarding, offering makers the opportunity to build income while staying true to their artistic values. Each finished piece stands as quiet evidence that beauty does not require perfection, only attention, patience, and respect for materials. And as more people discover this approach, a deeper appreciation grows for objects that feel real, tactile, and human, objects that carry the marks of hands and time rather than machines and shortcuts. The process of transforming rusty bolts into rustic beauty also encourages viewers to look differently at their surroundings, to notice the creative potential in garages, workshops, and forgotten corners, to see that what appears useless may simply be waiting for a new perspective. And this shift in thinking is perhaps the greatest outcome of all, because it extends beyond woodworking and into everyday life, encouraging mindfulness, resourcefulness, and creative confidence. As these sculptures and home accents make their way into homes, studios, and creative spaces, they carry more than visual appeal. They carry a message that imperfection is not something to hide, that history adds value, and that transformation is always possible, even for the most unlikely materials. From the first spark of inspiration to the final placement of a finished piece, the journey is filled with small, satisfying moments, moments where imagination turns limitation into strength, where rust becomes character, and where discarded fragments come together to form something cohesive, expressive, and alive. In the end, these rustic wood sculptures are not just decor. They are reminders that creativity begins with seeing differently, that beauty can emerge from neglect, and that with patience and intention, even the most overlooked materials can be transformed into art that warms homes, sparks conversation, and proves that creative potential exists everywhere, waiting to be discovered.